What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Grindline Podcast. You're listening to episode 283. I am your host, Greg. I am once again solo. It is the afternoon, which is super weird because we normally record at nighttime, but there were some circumstances last night that made recording not able to happen. So now I have to do it in the afternoon. Today we do have a mailbag. There is not really any news in Red Wings land. We're still waiting for Raymond to sign. We're still waiting for Seider to sign. So I'm going to take a lot of questions. We got about 12 questions, which was actually really good. But right off the top, I want to make everyone aware that we did start a Patreon. If you head over to patreon.com/the Grindline Podcast, there will be extra content posted there for Patreon members. I want to give a shout out to the initial Patreon members, Jace, Joe Barry, Brandon Case, and Mike Rizzo, for signing up initially to support us. Relatively cheap tiers. I got like a $3 tier and a $5 tier. One of the things I think I'm going to do is that post episode going forward, we might just record a 10-minute extra bit of content to post to our Patreon subscribers over on our Patreon page. So you can go ahead and head over there. Like I said, patreon.com/the Grindline Podcast and support the show. It helps us pay the bills, helps us get all our subs in order, and just get the content to you guys as quickly as possible and as informed as possible. But off the top, we're going to get right into our Q&A. So we got a question from Burner over on Twitter. Honest odds that MBN and ASP make Grand Rapids out of camp. He says, I think it's obvious they are not making Detroit, but I think they have a good shot at Grand Rapids, especially after the Gibson trade. And I thought about it for a minute, and the chances I'm giving them are 0.01%. I think there is almost no chance that either of them make it. MBN was asked where he's going. He said that he's going to try to make Detroit out of camp. He realized himself that there's a very slim chance. Axel Sandin Palika already basically said he's going over to the SHL. The Gibson trade, sure, it left a spot, but that spot was already filled. If you remember, Red Wings signed depth defenseman William Lagesson to a one-year contract at $775,000. The bet is that he will be down there in Grand Rapids. I don't think that either of those players, maybe they play in Grand Rapids once their season in the SHL is over, but they will both more than likely start the season with Haleftio over in the SHL, which is now apparently becoming Detroit's farm team since Frölunda has gotten rid of all the Red Wings prospects, I believe. I don't think there are any more Red Wings prospects on Frölunda. They're moving over to Haleftio. So I think it's a good chance that neither of them start in Grand Rapids. I don't see that happening at all. Following in the same vein, our friend Lucas over on Twitter asks, who do you expect to slot in the top pair in Grand Rapids with Edvinsson in Detroit now? He names William Wallinder, Shai Buium, or a free agent. I think that you probably still have Antti Tuomisto maybe as a top line player over there, and I would give those minutes probably to Wallinder. Buium's going to be new in Grand Rapids. He played in the playoffs for, I believe, a game or so. Wallinder could go into that spot. I think that's his next step in natural progression. Is he's a high-end prospect. He's putting this toolkit together. Dan Cleary had said he's basically a student of the game. He takes things very seriously. He learns and adapts. I think the next step before moving him to Detroit, possibly in the 25-26 season, would be getting him top pairing deployment in Grand Rapids. So my bet would be Wallinder. Maybe the year after, Buium is that guy. But I think that you give him time to come in as a middle pair D-man, get used to a little bit. So I would put Wallinder and Tuomisto probably as my top pair in Grand Rapids. And I do fully expect Simon Edvinsson to start in Detroit and play all season with the Detroit Red Wings. Adam Kerr asks odds that the roster, I'm guessing, is set, or if you think a move is still coming. Right D, I think, still needs an upgrade, but might wait until the trade deadline when someone like Adam Larson might be available. And this is a hard one too. We've gone back and forth. If you go listen to last episode, we talked about it. We don't think the roster is done, but you're inching closer and closer to now August. It is July 19th. You don't really have to have much perfect until end of September. Once you start heading toward preseason, that's when you need to get going. You can be 10% over the cap until the last day. You have to have your cap in order right before the season starts. But I don't think if something happens, it's not going to be huge. I agree. I still don't like the defense. I still think you need a top 4 right defenseman. But they had talked to the players. They had talked to Steve Yzerman. They'd asked, hey, does Gustafsson play right? Albert Johansson has played right in his time in Grand Rapids. Johansson needs a spot. Could he fill in on that second pair with Edvinsson like that pair was in Grand Rapids? I think they could, But I still think that if you do that, your defense is maybe slightly better defensively than last season, but you're not really upgrading as much as I think you need to in order to take that next step forward. So I would say I hope a move is still coming, but all signs right now, since the Truba deal is dead, he has put Detroit on his no trade list. It doesn't look like he's coming here. There are talks of Aaron Ekblad. I don't like what it would cost to extend Ekblad, and I think that's not really a realistic thing at this point. That maybe there's a move, but the longer you wait, I think the harder it gets. And right now, it looks like we may be set unless you buy out. We still don't have an answer on the Jeff Petrie buyout thing because there are multiple teams with his salary. You can't buy out Justin Hole. Maybe you trade away because you're still packed. Maybe you trade away Justin Hole and pick up a pick. I don't see that big move out there right now to be able to solidify the defense, which is upsetting. But I think it's what a lot of us we're kind of going with as the weeks go on. Eli Morgan asks, put yourself in the position of Ken Holland during his tenure of the Red Wings. You get one draft to redo every pick. What draft are you picking and what are the picks? Ah, that's hard. I mean, right off the top of my head, the draft I'm going to pick is the Philip Zadina draft. And I know we were excited about Zadina at the top. Everyone was excited about Zadina right when it started because he was kind of touted as that high power offensive shooter. And if he would have developed into that, he'd be in our top 6 right now, no issue. But he didn't. And when you look at the guys who were taken around the same as Zadina or after Zadina, and even in the second round, I'm not going to redraft the whole thing, but round 1, you got to take Quinn Hughes. Knowing what you know now, you take Quinn Hughes. And word at the time was Quinn Hughes wasn't even on the Red Wings board. They were looking at an impact forward. That's why they went with Zadina. But Quinn Hughes would be my pick now. If you look at round 2, instead of Berggren and McIsaac, now Berggren's still a good player, but you have a Kirill Marchenko who's making an impact in the NHL. At that second pick, you've got an Akil Thomas in round 2. There was Perunovic available, who's a good depth defenseman in St. Louis now. I think that is the trade because at the top, you look at who you picked and what became of that player, and then who you didn't pick and what became of that player. And that's why I don't like redrafts, because you never know. But you have more intel on round 1 and round 2 players than you do really on 3 and forward. I think round 3 forward, it gets real shaky and you hope to get a depth guy in those roles. But round 1 and 2 is where you see your middle of the lineup, top of the lineup talent. And for all intents and purposes, Zadina could have been that guy. It was absolutely possible. It just didn't happen. So if I'm redrafting, I'm going Quinn Hughes. And with my 2 round 2 picks, I'm going Kirill Marchenko and Akil Thomas. And I think that makes your team better now. But then again, would you have had Lucas Raymond? Would you have had Mo Seider if that happened? So I will stay positive. Philip Zadina was a blessing in disguise because it let us slip further and get 2 who are now going to be cornerstone players on this team for a very long time. But that would have been my redraft for that one. Jeremy Howell asks, when should we expect news on Mo and Raymond on pins and needles here? Same, dude. Like, I knew it wasn't going to be done by July 1st. Everyone knew it wasn't going to be done by July 1st. But it is now, like I said, July 19th, and it's still not done. Now, they have forever to do it. And now there's a talk back and forth of bridge deals, which I don't like. These are talents I think you need to lock up for a long time because you bridge them and they get better. You're going to end up having to pay them much, much more going forward. If you can sign them into an 8-year deal now for a relatively low cap hit, and then you say a new TV deal goes through and the cap goes way up. Every year the cap should be going up. I think we'll be over 100 million in the next 2 seasons, 3 seasons at the most, I think. So there's been zero news, which is kind of expected. Yzerman doesn't really let anything get out of the Red Wings managerial office. I would hope that by the end of July, in the next 10 days, that you would have a contract and then you go into August and you plan. And I think it's more just getting those guys security as well and letting them know, like, hey, it's done. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Let's just focus on hockey, focus on getting better and training, and move into next season with that attitude. Because I think new contracts for them in general will bring kind of a new, renewed sense of this is our team. We're gaining control now. We're the ones that are going to move this forward. We're here for the long run. Let's make this our team. Let's get out on the ice and let's win some games. So I would say that I'd hope within the next 10 days that a contract gets done for Raymond and Seider. And I think they're going to be relatively big contracts. I think if you sign Mo to an 8-year deal, you're looking at between 8.5 and 9.5. If you sign Raymond, you're looking between a 7.5 and an 8.5, I think. But those numbers are better looking at them now than, say, put them on a 3-year bridge, and then in 3 years you've got to pay Mo 14 million or $12 million, and you got to pay Raymond. Say he goes on a 40, he has 240 goal seasons, possibly. Say you've got to pay him 13 million, $14 million. I think you get him in low now and just ride it out. So with that, I think we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna do a word from our sponsor, DraftKings, and then we'll be back. We got a few more questions to go over, and there's some really good ones in here. So just take a minute. It'll be real quick. Word from DraftKings, and we'll be right back. This episode of the Grindline podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/THPN and get on your way to being your best self. In the age of social media, it looks like everyone has their life on track, but you only see the surface. Comparison is a thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on their Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. If the perfect social media lives of others are having you down, therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. Just remember that everyone needs a little bit of help sometimes. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, and empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma, but also those who are having just trouble in their life in general. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook. It's never too early to get in your Stanley Cup predictions for the 24-25 season. Maybe not the Detroit Red Wings, but hey, maybe you think Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers might actually pull it off this time. So download the app now and use code THPN. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPENY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2024. All rights reserved. And we're back, and we're going to hop right back into questions. JMB says, it's my birthday. Happy birthday, JMB. Hoping Steve has a couple contracts that didn't happen. Sorry about that. But along the same token, what are y'all's earliest memories of watching the Wings? What made you fans, and what made you take the step from casual to hardcore fan? So I moved back to Michigan from Florida in the summer of 1997. So I moved back at a really good time to just get in right when the Red Wings were like peak, like after their 96-97 win, right into the 97-98 win where they swept the Washington Capitals. And I think that's, if you're getting into a sport when they're really good and they're winning championships and they're going into a back-to-back, that's the perfect time to get in, because it really just sucks you in and it becomes something that you love and it grows with you. So then you go from there and you do the whole seasons in the 2000s. You look at Datsuk and you look at Zetterberg coming in and becoming amazing players. You look at just the peak Nick Lidstrom and then all the way into Lidstrom's retirement. I think that was the best time possibly to be a kid. I was like 7 years old, and to start watching hockey and becoming a Detroit Red Wings fan, and to go from casual to hardcore. Like when we started the podcast, we were on a downturn. The Red Wings were like really bad. And it is when right after it was the Dylan Larkin season, I believe, Dylan Larkin's first season. And then we started the podcast, and it's just doing this, interacting with fans online, getting into advanced stats, learning more about the players, who they are as people, who they are as players, what makes a team, what makes a good coach. I think the more you look at it, like, you can be a casual fan. Casual fans are fantastic, and it's really entertaining to be a casual fan. But once you catch on to it and you learn more, and it takes you to different places, and then you learn even more, and it's hardcore is really easy to do once you take like one or two steps. And my wife might not like it because it takes a lot of my time and I'm constantly giving her hockey facts that she doesn't want. But that was kind of the step from casual to hardcore, was the Red Wings stopped being really good. And part of us wanted to know why. Part of us wanted to see what was next. And then it kind of evolved into, well, what would we do? And that started the podcast that got us going to where we are today. And now we're on the rise back up. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And we had said this probably at the beginning of last season, what it looks like to have happy podcasts, what it looks like to have come on after a week and say, wow, we really killed it this week. We won every game. And we did that last season. But it's interesting to be a hardcore fan when your team is bad, and then to be a hardcore fan when your team starts becoming good again, because you get to really dive into what's making them tick, what's making them better. So that's my answer to that one. From Derek Dixon, who do you think the A's this coming season will go to? So we had what? We had one A that's out in David Perron. I think that Patrick Kane re-signing, I think, is a big sign. It's a big move for Kane himself to put his confidence in the team. I could see them giving an A to Patrick Kane. I think Mo Seider is probably my top pick right now to get an A. And then Larkin's going to have the C. I think that's undeniable. Your other A is probably going to go to a Michael Rasmussen, or to a Cop, or to a Ben Sherratt. And they might only have two. They've alternated A's in the past. I could see an alternating A between those guys. I could see Kane getting a permanent. I could see Mo getting a permanent and then alternating a third. But I think that Mo would be my choice because he is going to be here, like I said, for a long time. He's a long haul player. You could give some votes to Lucas Raymond. Lucas Raymond's going to be a long haul player. But I would start giving it to the core guys who are going to be here for a long time. Alex DeBrincat has worn an A. I think he wore an A in Ottawa too, where he has a longer contract that you could end up giving one to him too. But I think that Kane would be a fan favorite to get an A because he is a leader both on and off the ice for the team. And he's, I mean, historically wore a letter when he was in Chicago. So I could see those, but I'd put my money on Mo Seider, and let's say one of Cop or I'd say one of Cop or Sherratt would be my answers to that. Our friend Carlo asked Johnny Burgers, third line over under 45 points, fourth line over under 30 points. Again, this is making big assumptions that he's going to be on the team and not traded, but on a third line, 45 points, if he had 15 goals, he'd have to have 15 goals and 30 assists. I'm taking the under. I think if he's on the third line, he's a 35-point guy. On the fourth line, I'm going to take the God, I can't break even. I'll take the under too. Say if he's on the fourth line, if he's like a 28-point guy, I could see it. I mean, I think it's going to be tough sledding for Jonatan Berggren because, again, he seems like a top 6 skill guy without the defense, and he doesn't seem like a bottom 6 guy because of, again, the lack of defense and the lack of physicality. I think if he's on the fourth line, I'm 30 points. Okay, so I'll take the over on 30 points on the fourth line. I would take an under on the third line of 45 points, though. I think if he can get 20 goals, if he can be a 20 goal scorer and chip in 20 assists, I think that's good for a third line for him. And then he'd probably get some second line and power play time as well, so that could go up. For a fourth line, I'd say maybe he caps out at 35 points on a fourth line. I think a lot of people are putting a ton of faith in him to become that guy that the Red Wings thought they were missing. Like if they were saying, yeah, well, we got Tarasenko, great, and then they were hoping that Berggren became that Tarasenko type player, and that's just not his game. So I would say that I'm going to take the under on the third, and I am going to take the over on the fourth line for those points. So I would say over under 45 on the third line, but over 30 on the fourth line for Berggren. And I hope he makes the team because he's a really good player and his offensive instincts are excellent. But he just needs to fix that defense part of his game. And I'm not sure if he can do it because that's never really been his game in the first place. So it's turned him into a tweener. Maybe he can take that next step and just become a full time NHL player. And if he doesn't, I definitely think he's being traded because he's a guy that has to be on this roster and would never pass through waivers. Snowman at Lucas Solo on Twitter asks less about the Wings and more about the NHL as a whole. What needs to change to get viewership up to the level of something like basketball or baseball? A lot. The NHL marketing department sucks. Where do we start? The NHL marketing department sucks. The scheduling for the league sucks. The amount of back-to-backs sucks. Not having it available on public channels sucks. That's like football is huge because everyone, it's America's like sport. People say baseball is America's pastime, but football is really America's sport now. It's locally available on anyone who has a digital tuner antenna on their TV. You can watch football. Hockey is different. Hockey right now is making historically bad TV distribution choices with Bally Sports going out of business. I just don't understand. Like, it seems like the NHL is always two steps behind everyone else. Basketball is huge because it's easy to just pick up and play. Kids can play basketball at a local park. All you need is a ball. Hockey has historically been known as an expensive sport that if people aren't playing it, less people are watching it. Same with baseball. Baseball, you can go pick up a bat and a ball and play a game. It's the accessibility of the sport to play itself, plus the accessibility of the sport to watch and the marketing of the sport. So baseball, it's again, Americans have been watching baseball forever. Basketball, it's huge overseas as well. American basketball is huge overseas, as to where there's a lot of competition for hockey in other countries. There's the Czech leagues, there's the Swedish leagues, there's the Russian league. There are those in basketball, but they're not as big and not as popular, as to where those countries grew up with like the SHL or they grew up with the KHL and it's not new to them. So there's less for them to watch for the NHL. So marketing, accessibility to watching the game, and also accessibility to playing the game. So we need to make it cheaper. We need to put it on local TV channels. We need to get more promotion overseas, which they're trying to do with stuff like the Global Series. But I think those are just the basic steps to making the NHL as popular as the NBA or as the MLB. And then it's also getting better scheduling, getting primetime viewing, getting marketing for those big games like the Winter Classic. They should market the hell out of the Winter Classic. And I mean, there should be commercials all over the place. There should be paid ads all over the internet for something like the Winter Classic. And it just seems that their heart is not, either their heart or their brain is not into the marketing of the sport. And I partially blame it on Gary Bettman. And I think it could get much better once Bettman is out, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. I'd love it to happen. I don't see it happening anytime soon. This one I'm going to read and then I'm going to dig into it a little bit. So Nick Taylor asks, let's talk defense. We have 4 pylons. He named Sherratt, Hole, Petrie, and Gustafson. 2 young guys and steady, reliable Olimata. Lagesson is there as depth. How on earth are Lalone and his crew going to make 3 effective pairings out of this group? So I'll do my pushback first. Sherratt played well, actually above well with Mo Seider after Wallman was removed from Seider's pair. So I'm not going to call Sherratt a pylon because he was able to prove that he had a bounce back season, was able to play top pairing minutes with Mo Seider, and they were a very effective pair. Hole, I might not be on the team anymore. It's another one where it's like you can't buy him out, but if you could find someone to take him with a player and just get him off the roster, free up that money and free up a spot, that would be my decision there. Or you waive him. You waive him, you send him to Grand Rapids, you recoup, I don't know, it's like 1.25 million or something, and you just get him off the roster. Petrie, he's going to be a third pair guy, hopefully. Hopefully he's a third pair guy. People are saying second. He's going to be a second pair because people are telling me that Gustafson can't play second pair. His deployment has to be very specific to power play. And then he's not good defensively because he's sheltered. I still think there's player there. I still think that they're probably going to try to run Gustafson on a second pair or they could run him on a third if they want Johansson to be a second pair D and make Petrie your extra. So the way I'm looking at it is your top pair of Sherratt and Seider. Your second pair, what I would do right now, Edvinsson and either Gustafsson or Johansson. Your third pair is Olimata and Gustafsson or Johansson, and Petrie is your extra right now. Is it ideal? No. Again, we talked about it a little earlier. Do we want moves to be made still? Yes. But right now, running with that, it is more defensively responsible than it was with someone like a Shane Gostisbehere. And I still don't think, I mean, you give up some point production, but does Gustafsson pick up some point production that way too? I think Mo QB is your PP1. And I think that's where your group looks like. Now, Lalone runs a different system than Gustafsson's been in before. But I think we're being disingenuous when we call Sherratt now a pylon because he did play well last season with Mo Seider. My one move is I might want to trade for someone like Erasmus Anderson. He plays for the Calgary Flames right now. Has a projected WAR of 75%, EV offense 83, EV defense of 18, but he's an 85% on the power play. So you want a guy to come in and really fill that role that Shane Gostisbehere filled on the power play. Rasmus Anderson's your guy. In 78 games last season, he had 9 goals and 30 assists for 39 points. But I think if you're trying to replace offense while having someone who's also better defensively than Ghost was, Rasmus Anderson is going to be your guy. You could trade. They don't really need to give up money. The Calgary Flames have a lot of money, but they do need good prospects. So you could trade a pick and Berggren over to Calgary to try and get someone like Rasmus Anderson. And maybe that works. You could trade Marco Casper is a name that gets dangled out because you have Nate Danielson. Not the same player, I know, but it's a name that gets dangled. So maybe you do something like that going forward. But I think Rasmus Anderson is a guy you could bring in. He is 27 years old. He's 6'1", 202 pounds. He's a solid defenseman who has high offensive upside, but is better defensively than Ghost was. And I think he's a guy that would slot right in on your second pair right D alongside Simon Edvinsson, who would make up for some of Rasmus Anderson's defensive shortcomings. Then you have a third pair of Mata and Johansson. And then I think your defense is set. That is taking the defense to a next level. So again, hopefully something like that happens. And maybe if we keep talking about it, we can speak it into existence. But as of right now, I think your top pair is Sherratt Seider. Your second pair is probably Edvinsson Gustafsson, and your third pair is probably Mata and Johansson with Petrie as an extra. So that's what I would go with right now if I were to start today. But I think that's all the questions. Man, again, solo shows suck, but I got through all the questions. Again, if you have any other questions going into next week's episode, which I think we are recording on Monday, go ahead and drop them down into the comments of our YouTube video or shoot them over to us on Twitter at GrindlinePod. I like to thank Vintage Detroit, which is the only place you should get Detroit jerseys from and worked on, the Hockey Podcast Network for hosting us and spreading us around. And once again, we do have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/thegrindlinepodcast, you can chip in there to help keep the show running and help us pay for things like our subscriptions to Evolving Hockey, to Elite Prospects, to JFresh's Patreon, where we get a lot of our stuff from. But that is going to do it for us tonight. So from Greg, you stay classy, Hockey Town.